Hello, everybody. This is Catholic Dad, episode number 351, Coronavirus Event 201. I don't know if everybody knows what Event 201 is, but I think everybody knows what the coronavirus is at this point in time. Event 201 is an event that was put on in New York City on October 18th and 19th of last year in 2019. It was sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now, Bill Gates, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a man that gives tons and tons and tons of money to the World Health Organization, and he's also really spent a lot of his philanthropy in his life to expanding vaccine programs to the third world, trying to prolong lives in the third world. A lot of people say, wow, he's really great. I say not so fast. We actually have to analyze the data before we can actually determine if he's benevolent of heart or not. He sponsored an event, Event 201 in New York City back in October 18th and 19th last year. It was called Event 201. Essentially what it was a pandemic war game. Now, you could look it up yourself, Event 201, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Look it up if you want. But it was a war game for pandemic exercise. Like, what should we do as a global government, a global response to a pandemic that affects the globe? How will we have all the governments respond and all the authorities and the media and so on and so forth? And let's play this war game and see if we could actually make the pandemic less, right? That's what the intent was. By the way, Bill Gates has been lecturing on potential pandemics occurring on planet Earth, and we don't have an international coordinated community together to actually fight a pandemic for over 5 years now. You can actually look on TED Talks. He gave a TED Talk back in 2015 about this. He gave two TED Talks this year after the coronavirus. He's been speaking on multiple other avenues for the past 5 years. You can look them all up. He also had a journal in New England, or he had an article in the New England Journal of Medicine when coronavirus broke out this year. He's the expert. I don't know why Bill Gates is the expert on coronavirus, but he was, and he got put in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is a New World Order medical magazine. It's just the way it works. It's a journal. Well, anyway, so what did they do in Event 201? They were playing out a pandemic war game. They were actually trying to hypothesize what would we do if a new pandemic played out, and so it was a conference where they invited 135 people from around the globe, media moguls, health organization moguls, CDC representatives, and so on and so forth. And they played out like a game on how do we coordinate international efforts to combat some kind of pandemic. Now, you look it up, and then hit the scenario key at the bottom. What's the scenario that they played out on October 18th, 2019? And it was this. Pretend, for example, that some novel coronavirus, a zoonotic novel coronavirus that's transmissible from bats to human, gets spread throughout the human population, and it starts spreading easily around the globe, and it becomes quite virulent. Lots of deaths occurred. And they said in there, let's pretend it occurs in Brazil, but it spreads to China. Well, it's funny because literally 2 months before that occurred, they actually had a War Games pandemic scenario with Bill Gates. That should bother everybody immensely. Like, why the heck did this guy have the exact same scenario that's been playing out recently? And oh, by the way, why did Bill Gates run to the forefront of TED Talks and New England Journal of Medicine when this played out? Why did he have such influence when he really is not a man who has major influence on this issue? But all that being said is, what should really scare you on the TED Talks he's been giving, he said, okay, so here's the deal. We want this thing to be quelled by all our social policies and social distancing and quarantining and so on and so forth and stopping economic activity. But what we want to do is we want to develop a vaccine, and we want to be able to, in the future, administer the vaccine, and we're going to give people vaccine passports. Like, how does he get to decide this? And by the way, why would any person other than the devil himself think this thought? And we're going to give people passports, vaccine passports, that you have to prove you either had the vaccines or you're immune to the disease, that you'll be able to travel around the globe. Meaning that, in the words of Adolf Hitler or good German soldiers, show me all papers. Like, you have to prove yourself a good citizen of the world before you can actually go and be able to have full rights within this world. Now, this may play out in hospital systems like me. I'm a physician. I work in a hospital. They are all, most hospitals, by the way, are controlled by big corporations. Big corporations are always in bed with big government. I am seeing the day where my administration comes to me and says, you can't work here if you don't have the coronavirus vaccine. And I'll say to them, Coronavirus vaccine, that's the one that's produced from fetal stem cells. Is that true? And they'll be like, well, we don't know that. And I'll be like, look it up. It probably is. And they'll say, well, you have to have it to work here. It's our policy. And I'll say, has anybody done any double-blind placebo testing studies on this? Has anybody done any safety trials on it? What are the ingredients of the vaccinations? Like nobody knows anything about anything. Everybody's going to be operating with zero data points. And why are they going to be operating with zero data points? Because for every dollar, this is what Bill Gates said, for every dollar invested in vaccines, there's $44 of return on investment. Because once you start mass vaccinating people, you get your money back in a windfall profit. So everybody's, when you fall on the line of get a vaccine, it's good for you. Well, not so fast. First off, there's too much politics involved in the whole situation, and there's way too much money involved in the whole situation. And so, by the way, look up Event 201 with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and realize that they've been planning such an event for quite some time. And it should shock you at how similar it is to the situation that's playing out right now. And it should shock you that the guy that held the event, that planned the pandemic war game 2 months before the pandemic played out, is the one that's kind of the talking head about where to move with this thing. And if they start talking about vaccine passports and that you have to actually have vaccines to travel and so on and so forth, you could tell me I was right, and then you could say I'm not as weird as I sound right now. I know it sounds a little bit conspiracy nut job, but I think it's probably going to play out that way. And if it doesn't, I'll come on and say it didn't play out that way. Or if it does, I'll come out and say, see, I told you so. The other thing that should really bother people is this. They're mobilizing Army Reserve troops and, reservists, military around the country right now. And they're setting up military hospitals and so on and so forth. But the one thing that they know is going to happen is this, is that we're going to have a little bit of social breakdown due to the large unemployment. And we might actually have some riots in the street, mass looting, so on and so forth. That's possible. And here's my prediction for you, by the way. The government may actually step up and use the Army Reservists to create social order. That would be a major problem. And whenever you have people resisting, creating social chaos and resisting the government's orders to stay home and not do looting and chaos, then the calls will come, and the calls will come for Americans turning your firearms. And so this is the one big thing I want to warn you about, by the way. They can take away your right to work. They can take away your right to go to church. They can take away your right. They can take away all your rights, and we're doing it right now. We're actually saying, okay, we're good little patriots for the good of the country, good of the herd. We're going to do this, but and by the way, we might tolerate this for let's say 2-3 months, but we ain't going to tolerate it much more than that. And I think it's probably a reasonable thing to do because nobody really knows and nobody knows how to act. But when they say to the populace, because of the social chaos, because of the rioting that we created, we're now going to ask you to turn over your firearms, that's one step too far. And that's when every good-hearted patriot American should step up and say, no, not on my watch. And don't turn your firearms over. Hide them, bury them in the backyard. I don't know what you're going to do with them. Make sure they're clean before you do that. But do not abrogate your rights to autocracy and a dictatorship and the edicts of the state. That's what weak people do. And if you do that and we take away enough firearms out of the hands of the American people, we will turn into a tyrannical, oppressive regime before you can even say the days of the week. So anyway, that's the big warning for you. Don't turn over your firearms. Look up Event 201. I think it's really an interesting point in history. And maybe I'm crazy, but boy, I don't think I'm crazy. I think it sounds reasonable. So get the mask. Sorry, you can't get the mask. But when it happens again, get the mask as fast as you can. Live a sacramental life. Do prayer hours. Pray the rosary with your family. That's really the most important part. Love your kids and don't give up your rights, people. They were fought for, they're hard-earned, and they're yours. They're not the government's to give you. They're the government's to protect of yours. God bless you all. Take care.